Very exciting. Thank you everyone for joining again. For those who are new to Sensing Clues, we are a European nonprofit foundation supporting conservation organizations on the ground across the whole world. Our mission is very simple: helping conservation teams to turn data into actionable information through user-friendly data-driven technology. Over the years, we developed a complete ecosystem that supports organizations from data collection all the way to analysis, reporting, and decision-making. And we also do a lot of coaching, training, and support. That's one of our USPs, to have this really personal relationship with all our partners. One area we will touch today is impact reporting, which was developed in close collaboration with WildlifeWorks. WildlifeWorks is a pioneering community-led conservation and carbon projects. Their work demonstrates how conservation can create benefits for both people and nature. The collaboration on impact reporting started 3 years ago when hunters started a major initiative to transform how data was collected, managed, and reported across the organization. With data coming from many different projects, teams, and locations, the challenge was to create a standardized, trustworthy, and future-proof system that could support projects worldwide. And together with us, we developed an integrated data management and impact reporting ecosystem, connecting field data collection with reporting and verification. But to tell us more about that journey and the role of trustworthy data in carbon and nature credit projects, I'd like to hand over now to Hunter. Hunter, thanks again for joining us. The stage is yours.
Everyone, I'm so excited to be here today. We've been talking about this day for a little while, and Jan Kees and I have been working together for what feels like a good eternity on this project. So I am the Impacts Evaluation Manager at a company called WildlifeWorks. We are a global carbon offsetting company, and I'll talk a little bit more today about just briefly what RED is and what carbon offsetting is, but mostly about the kind of data issues that we've been having and how Jan Kees is helping us, and Sensing Clues in general has really been instrumental in kind of moving us in the direction that we want to go to, which is standardized and trustworthy data. Go next slide. So how do carbon credits work? If you aren't familiar with this, just one slide on it. Carbon credits, essentially, they put a financial value on intact forests or forests that are still up, which enables communities to protect land that in most cases they're already stewarding. So as we know, forests sequester CO2, and the credits are basically sold to buyers to offset the costs that they're having in carbon. So say Netflix trying to offset their carbon output will basically give us money to help a community keep a forest intact, and then we funnel that cash very transparently through to our IP and LC communities, and they basically do with it what they want. So we work across the global south. We have some of the longest running carbon projects in the world. And these projects do need to meet pretty rigorous voluntary carbon standards, which are becoming increasingly more rigorous for good reason. Next slide. So RED does deliver for communities. Two of these ways are a little bit more indirect, and one is quite direct. The first indirect way is that we're trying to keep forests intact, which is trying to essentially work on climate change issues, which for many communities on the ground is a very real threat. We have rising waters, we have changing climate and drought, and for many of the individuals that we work with, this poses very real threats to their daily lives and survival. So inherently, by trying to protect forests, we are trying to address climate change. The second way is through biodiversity. We as conservationists want to keep biodiversity intact. We care about that a lot. And some of our communities also care about that in an esoteric way. Many of them can care about it in a more utilitarian way. And they want to make sure that their forests and their wildlife stays around for a long time so that they can use it in a sustainable subsistence or a sustainable market way. So we are basically helping, once again, to keep biodiversity for the world and also for our local partners. And then the other way that we help communities is directly. So at our company, and I know this isn't the case for all carbon projects, but at our company, we have a very transparent model where our projects go through a very rigorous FPIC process, which is free and prior informed consent, and that runs throughout the entire course of the project. So if 10 years in, a community doesn't want to work with us anymore, they are literally, they can up and leave. Off-pick is what we call ongoing. We also have a very transparent revenue sharing model, and the communities decide from the onset what it is that they want their money to go towards. So whether that's to build a school, whether that's to reduce malaria rates, whatever it is that's important to them, they make decisions through that through what we call a social biodiversity impact assessment process. And that informs the entire lifetime of the project, and they can update that over time, but they get to decide all the impacts that they want to have on their community. Next slide. So for that, you can imagine that we really need trustworthy data. We need it in order to optimize that our activities are actually helping the individuals who have agreed to work with us. Having good, trustworthy data allows us to conduct something called monitoring, evaluation, learning, which is often shortened to MEL. So the MEL process, it allows us to basically have this adaptive management approach where we can see like what activities are doing what we think they're doing, which ones are being not as effective. We can spot issues that are coming up as they go. And in general, this is just continuing to build trust through, as I say, through transparency and ongoing reporting. MEL also is very important for us to have the projects to begin with. We basically need good data to have buyers, as there has been, for good reason, some market distrust in recent years, a lot around the carbon accounting, but not just around the carbon accounting itself, also around the social and biodiversity impact claims that projects are making. So we need to be able to back up our claims. Did we actually do what we say we're doing? And that requires some really good data. In addition to that, from both just the buyer and the investor perspective, because of that, there are these standard bodies like Vera and a new one called Equitable Earth, which are increasingly requiring defensible, attributable data. So not only did we see the change that we're hoping to make, but are we the ones that caused that change or contributed to that change? Next slide. So that sounds all fine and dandy. Unfortunately, on the ground, things have not always gone to plan. We have had some pretty big challenges in our 20 years of being around, and that just comes from the nature of fieldwork. And one of which is that there's a lot of data collected through paper or Word documents. And as many of you know, this can be handwritten logs or accounts of things which don't necessarily have GPS coordinates or timestamps, or data can be kind of inconsistently or not fully filled out. That information then needs to be transcribed to the computer so it can be analyzed, which of course leads to human error. Similarly, we have data that's collated on spreadsheets throughout the month or on a monthly basis, which takes our projects teams a lot of time to collate, so that we actually have individuals whose whole job is just to kind of like transfer data when they could be doing other more useful things for the project. We've gotten data through WhatsApp. I've gotten text data before. I've gotten emails with anecdotal pieces of information before, and Obviously, this is not the most consistent and standardized way that we would like to approach our data management. And this means that on a year-to-year basis over a 20-year period, you're going to have data that's collected completely differently by different people. You're going to have one indicator that is defined a little bit differently across those years, and the data used to inform that indicator is thus different, which means that you can't truly compare over time. And yeah, and then that's all just even just within one of our projects. Next slide. And this issue can just be magnified once you get more projects. So we are actually, as a company, in a bit of a boom. We are working to expand to quite a few projects throughout Latin and South America, some additional projects in Africa where we work most extensively, as well as in Asia. And so, as you can imagine, having those issues in just a couple projects is not something we want to sort of replicate elsewhere. Instead, what we would like to have is a much more standardized approach. But currently, we have teams in different places who have been trained differently. They have different methodological backgrounds, different approaches to collecting data. This means that how an indicator is defined in one project could be exactly the same name, but it's a completely different definition somewhere else, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we need to understand as the global company, like what actually is happening in what places and what data can and cannot be compared against each other. In addition to this is more people just means more ports of entry. So we have had firsthand experiences where outside actors, both buyers and government bodies, have come and talked to different individuals in different project teams and asked for information. And that information may even just be one or two numbers off from what we have submitted to, say, Vera, a standard body, which leads us to scrutiny and potential auditing. So from a legal perspective, it's super important for us to not have issues like that occur. So, and that just happens when you have lots of different people working on different things who have different access to different spreadsheets, even, for example. And so, yes, as we expand our company, we don't want to magnify these issues. We want to eliminate them. All right, and go forward. So, Sensing Clues to the rescue. They have been incredibly helpful over these past couple of years. So we had actually been working with Sensing Clues in our project sites in Kenya before I even joined the company, and they were doing things on mostly the biodiversity side, but also a bit on social. They were collecting point data, helping us to collect point data in one of our projects. So things that are kind of GPS tagged in different areas. And then Yankees and I started talking, and we're like, okay, we need more. We want to take this, like, model that's happening for this one subset of data, and we want to expand this out to also our non-point data. So all of our household surveys that aren't necessarily geolocated, but it's more like an accumulation of lots of data. And we want to be able to funnel all of this information up into a system that is company-wide, as we're calling it, our central data repository, lovingly shortened to CEDAR, like the tree, and have that information all funnel up to one system that is standardized and that is essentially based off of a few different things, which is one, the data that comes in is all verifiable. Everything is coming in through a Sensing Clues app. So we are not doing any manual uploads if we can avoid it. So everything, we know where it came from. It has a trackable source going back. And not only that, but we have decided previously exactly what piece of information is going to be collected on the ground. So and then that specific piece of information is then populating a specific indicator the same way year in, year out, or across projects. So this gives us a both like a grounded truth that's happening, as well as a funnel that we can track and is controlled. This allows for us to, once again, have these standardized indicators, which is important for us as a project, trying to understand what's going on, as well as I say, for our outside individuals that we're having to work with, like Vera and Equitable Earth, and reporting to quite a few, like, SDG requirements in various countries. Another big component of this is that it creates essentially a single source of truth, so that person A in project A is not having a slightly different perspective of what's going on than person B in that project, or person C in a different project. Everybody only goes to one data source, and that means that we're also able to control that data access. So Youngis has been really good about helping us think through, like, who has access to what data at what levels, and that project team have, more access to this data, whereas, maybe our outside partners, they only have access to like the top level of information. They don't need to see every little nitty-gritty detail. So that has been a really big push forward that we've been doing with them. Next slide. And going back to our original goal of helping communities, well, essentially this has just enabled some real-time reporting, which has been real-time impact. So we just ran this workshop to train and roll out these apps in our Indonesia project site. And already the head of that team has profusely discussed how helpful it has been, even in just the past month, to understand what's happening in real time on the ground in our project, and for her to make quicker changes to see, like, okay, do we like what we're seeing, or do we need to kind of shift gears already based off of even just kind of our baseline information? Because a lot of this stuff, you design a project with what you think is going on, but then once you collect baseline data, you realize, oh, maybe actually things are a little bit different to what I thought they were. So it's already been having them think through as a project team and as a community, kind of some of their goals and what they want to do with it, which is absolutely incredible. So this is that kind of faster decision making. We also are being held to, a higher standard of accountability and transparency with our on the ground partners, which is something that we as a company really value. So, yeah, we've just sort of already seen how quickly this is helping us, and it's been a cool process to be a part of. Next slide. So, does anybody have any direct questions for me on that?
Feel free to raise your hands. You can talk, or also put them in the chat, or you can also save them up for later, and then we can discuss them at the end. Casey's got a question, please.
Basically, the apps and things to try and standardize the data collection. Did you have any kind of pushback from people? I've always done it this way. I like to go out and write it on my piece of paper and send in my piece of paper. How did you kind of handle that? This is the change. This is why it's such a good thing, but it is a change kind of issue.
100%. Yeah. It's interesting because you actually see two sides of the same coin. I'll start with, in our new projects that don't have this long history of this is how I've always done it in this project, even if they're like have worked in other projects, there is this kind of sense of like, you sort of present them like, we could make your life easier, and they're like, oh, okay, that sounds fabulous. But in our longer projects, where you have a guy who's been collecting this data for 15 years, there's definitely a lot of pushback. We had an interesting case in which the father wants to collect paper data, and the son who works on the project sees the value of digital data. So they actually had a bit of a debate between the two of them, even within the same family. I think what we've been trying to do is, how we've approached this is to do kind of a basically just a proof of use. So working with the teams that were most resistant or most resistant to change, we have kind of left them to last a little bit. Basically just showed them this is the direction that we're going in. And we've done everything around the field data itself. So we've been basically setting up the whole digital ecosystem itself for those projects. And we've been already starting on the ground with our newer projects. And we've already started to see communication. And that was where basically the son of that family was like, oh, like, why aren't we doing that? So I think you kind of have to show a little bit of a proof of case for individuals who are really like against change. And there is a value of paper data. Like there is a wonderfulness that you can go back and you have a hard copy and you can look at it. And I know that for a lot of our teams who have done a lot of like measuring, tree width and all these things, they have a system that really works for them in the field. And so it's not like it's just all bad. It's just that we're, trying to also to understand and have conversations with those teams as to what aspects like of the data process are most useful to them. So like, is it about just the physical copy, or is it about like the way that it fits in your belt because you have this notebook that you're used to holding? Like, is it about just, the structure of the sheet itself? So we actually have a project that it's not paper, but it's actually digital. There's a digital app in one of our new projects that they had been working on because they've just come into our company and they've been using it with another company. So our project team leader there, it took them so long to learn how to use that app and the structure of it that there's a lot of fear around transitioning to something different. And so, to Yamaguchi's credit, he has been like very dutifully working with the existing system so that for that project team, the order of questions, the phrasing, everything is going to look as, it might be blue or green versus green, but we're trying to make it as similar as possible so that the team doesn't feel like this is a new thing. Like it just feels like maybe a software update. But yeah, it's a real problem. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other questions? Not for now. So then I suggest you hand over to Jan Kees.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks, Hunter, for your nice introduction. It's making me blush a little bit sometimes, but it's a real pleasure to work on this project with you and all teams behind you as well. And I named this presentation, and please, if you've got any questions, pop in, closing the last mile data gap. What you often see is that people have their reports and that at a certain project level, people have spreadsheets and stuff that they push towards the headquarters. But if you then ask, where does this data really come from? Where did this workshop take place? How many men and women participated? Can I see the minutes of that meeting? Then there's a big gap. And that is actually the gap that needs to be closed to make your data trustworthy, auditable, so that everyone can really see where did this number come from. Next slide, please. I created a small overview, and this is the only picture I have. And then sometimes we will dive into deeper if you have questions or if I'd like to explain a bit more. But if you can see, it all starts with the MEL plan, the monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And the learning part is a very important part here, because it means that in time you learn, which means you need to adapt. And that means that your system needs to be adaptable as well. So the indicators that we design and that the people in the front of the project design before the project starts, they might get new insights, maybe even 2 or 3 days after the project started running. Because then the reality comes down and sinks in. And then you see that some things are mistaken, or that you have new insights or new species that you actually would like to add to your monitoring schedule, that you now have maybe initiatives within the community that are very worthwhile exploring further, which then also might be included in a special indicator that shows you how beehives or any other initiatives is performing in this project. So the important part there is it's community-led. The people on the ground, the project teams and the communities are autonomous in defining what their project level indicators are, what their targets are. And this is, of course, very different from Indonesia or Colombia or Zambia or South Africa, because they've got different populations, they've got different vegetation, different ecosystems, different problems. So the indicators and the ML plan are always tailor-made to their situation, which means also that our data model needs to bridge the project level tailor-made indicators and requirements in the sense of data, but at the same time we need to guarantee that everything that's recorded at ground level can also be seamlessly aggregated all the way to headquarters, so that it can be used for standardized reporting to standards like the VERA or Equitable Earth and others. And that is an important part where the data model, which sits in the middle, plays a critical role in how to do that. When we look at the field data, once you have defined your indicators, you can start collecting all kinds of data, but we make a distinction between two types actually. Of course, you've got satellite information, which is often used for calculating the carbon and making information about well, the coverage of the forest and the density or the height of the forest if you've got LiDAR. But what we do is the field data. So everything on the ground truth is recorded with event data. It's ad hoc. There's a meeting with the community, maybe a committee in the community, or a demonstration, or a school program, or a bursary which is handed out. Then that's an event, and that event needs to be recorded. Sometimes there's also surveys, like a household survey. By the end of the year, or maybe every 4 or 5 years, you do a survey and you ask questions like, what are the major energy sources you are using? What are the sanitation and water solutions you are using? And then you can follow progress more on a survey level. And for that, we have different tools. When that data comes in, it's very important that it's geotagged, of course, and time tagged, but also that the quality is of high level. So what Hunter already said, it needs to be complete, of course, it needs to be correct and all that. It needs to be, in other words, trustworthy, but it means also that it needs to be edited sometimes, because the data might not be complete, and then you want to add a few details, or there might be mistakes, and then you want to correct those mistakes. At the same time, you want to keep track of what changed, so that the original data and the updated data can be compared, and that can be done not by technicians, but by any auditor that's coming into the field to look at the data and see where did it came from and what does it do. And all that needs to be timely. And when we say timely, we say anytime you touch the keyboard, the database is updated, so your reports are updated. So if you have an indicator that is describing the number of hornbills spotted in Kalimantan, then every time someone records a hornbill, it immediately informs the indicator list. And the data quality, if it's an important aspect that needs additional checking with someone who says this record now has been verified by an expert, it's true, we corrected it and we connected it and we looked at the quality of it and we find it trustworthy, then it gets a special tag, and then it can also be used for the VERA system for the formal presentations. But in the meantime, the project managers on the ground always have an overview of everything which happened and the state of where it is. And of course, that's done with dashboards. So the dashboard is a single point of truth with different perspectives. So for a project manager, the dashboard might look a little bit different because he's interested in different aspects. But if you are then interested in the indicators that are related to equitable Earth, then you want to see the equitable Earth indicators, or the VERA indicators, or the Sustainable Development Goals indicators. And then those should always be the same, so that your people who are working for marketing and communications or talking with journalists are not telling different stories all over the place, because you need to be, you need always to be able to get back to the original data and say, look, this is how it looks like. So that is the turning wheel, and as you can see, it's a wheel spinning around, but in between the steps, there's always a feedback loop. So from the MEL plan, you think about which indicators should be, are we going to devise for this project? And often it's about 80 to 100 indicators. But once you are working with people on these indicators, you get new insights, which could influence your MEL plan. And then again, it influences your indicator list. The same way, there's a feedback loop between the indicator list and the field data, and so on, all circle around. So just have a look at the indicator list. Rebecca, if you click on the right shaded thing, then you see all the indicators here, in this case of the Gabra and Burrito project, 76 indicators. If you want to add a new indicator, you just add it here. And then you can define what kind of source you're using, like ODK data, it's a survey, or CLUI data, which is more the events. You can then also decide on how do you calculate this indicator. So the calculation rules, next slide, are very transparent and can be shared with anyone. And typically, of course, you define those rules in the beginning of your project when you define this indicator. But if later, for example, you define, for example, fire risk management as an indicator, and then you also have a new activity which contributes to fire risk management, you might include that data element then also into this formula. So for example, fire response is of course a part of fire management. If that is a new element, then the next slide, you can see that you can add those elements as either in a construction where you say either it should be a report about fire management, or it should be a report about fire prevention, and it should all be related, for example, to trainings or to exercises or to workshops, etc. Depending on the project, how they talk about things in a semantic way, in a meaningful way, you can define those indicators in line with their language, in line with how they perceive the problems, how they tackle the problems, and then create the indicators in this particular way. Next slide. So the information on how that is done can be shared with anyone. So there's an advanced API showing people all the nitty-gritty details of the technology, how the indicator is calculated, but there's also some management expressions to say how it's done. The arrow on the left brings us back. Yeah, thank you. So that is how indicators are managed in the platform, and where they are, where you can discuss with the project management and with Hunter in this case on how are we going to calculate that particular information. On the field data, and please ask questions, interrupt me when you are there. We have this data model which plays a critical role in everything, on every project, but also on the global, local level. We have taxonomies, a difficult word for lists of words which are organized in a logical way. And here you can see, for example, in community work, that we have subjects that people talk about. We have beneficiaries, so that's who is the target group. We've got activities like we are giving a training or a workshop or a game drive, but there's always also a subject. And these list of subjects, we've got 66 on the left, and in this particular project, 8 selected for this particular program in this particular area. And those activities, those subjects are important for this project. So by combining elements that are relevant for you and skipping the ones which are not relevant for you, you can easily tailor-make your data collection scheme for your projects. You can even do that by groups. So if you've got biologists, they will have other information to collect with the app than people that are working with the communities, or rangers that are doing the patrols and look for disturbances. All these different groups, even citizen scientists, people from the community that you would like to contribute to, for example, early warning systems around human-wildlife conflicts, or animals roaming through the village, then these can be recorded and organized in groups quite easily by making them tailor-made. Next slide. So on the event side of things, we work with a Cluey data collector, which you can download from the App Store. And on the survey part, we work with ODK Survey. It's the standard ODK enterprise tool suite. So everything, if you work with ODK, you can implement and import your ODK surveys also in the Sensiklus platform. So all the different things like sightings, patrols, interventions that you take in the field, you do it with Cluey, and all the periodic surveys, let's say once a year or once every few years, are done with ODK. Back to the screen. So then you've got your indicators. You've got the information prepared for collecting information for these indicators in the field. And then you go to the data quality part, where people need to know what was recorded and is the quality up to the standard that we have as a project, but also at a company level. So and then auditing is very important, that you know, I need to see the history of this record, and I want to be able to defend it to the auditors. Because if people from Vera are dropping in and ask you, can you show me the data, and can you also prove to me that this data is not fraudulent, then you need a system where the history cannot be mutated, it cannot be edited. Of course, the up-to-date record can be edited, but then you should see the differences so that it's transparent to all. And also the purpose is, of course, that you get a higher data quality. Thank you. So from there, you go to your dashboards, and that's the easy part. Well, it's not so easy to build it. We've been working with Hunter on this for a good 2 years to organize the data in a sensible way to make sure that it can be aggregated across different levels. So you see here that you've got projects in different areas, you've got regional levels, and you've got also, of course, the global level, and all the information, irrespective of how it was collected, is aggregated in real time through this dashboard. This one is called Cockpit, because this is for the project managers on the ground, maybe also country or region levels. We call it CDAR as soon as we have the verification of the data in place. So there's also projects that do have spreadsheets that do not yet run, or maybe will never run through the Sensiklus platform. And then they still have data collections that need to be incorporated, that needs to add and contribute to these indicators. But then you need to add also other data processing pipelines to tackle all the particularities of those private data collections. And that then turns it into the CDAR verified platform, which is shared with everyone. So the cockpit is an internal way of looking at the data. CDAR is the external lens that we give to the data, because that is the verified section where you are confident that the data you share is approved by all the different stakeholders. So you see here a list of buckets as Hunter has defined them, and buckets are topics on categories of topics, where so carbon, a bucket contains all the indicators related to carbon, conservation, all the indicators related to conservation, and so on. Next slide. You see an example of an indicator, which is change in the number of confiscated wildlife stuff, like meat and tusk and horn and all that. And then you can see also here charcoal has been recorded, and you can see it throughout the year. Because we are looking here back this year, you see a timeline in months. If you look back at all times, you will see a timeline by year. And if you look at the quarters, you will see it by week. So that is also something that is developing as we speak. So that the requirements of both the international team with Hunter and the local teams on the ground, they both have their requirements to look at the data and to use this information for their daily operations and decision making, but also for their more strategic decision making on what are we going to do in the next few months, or what are we going to do before the end of the year, because we are not up to speed yet in certain areas. Then that can all be used for them to manage their projects in a better way. And it's made feasible because all the information that is processed in the field is instantly translated into these dashboards. So back to the main part, the core of all this is in the center. So you can click that one as well. And that is the semantic data model. So we don't have a database just that one. We don't have a database which is like a relational database, often known as, like, for example, Microsoft Access or Oracle. It's a quite unique database where we combine, it's a geospatial store, which means everything is geotagged. Everything has a location and a timestamp. It's a document store, which means that all the documents that you are collecting can be imported into this database and used. So it could be a field sighting, a report, a JSON, a map shape, and so on. And then, of course, it's a semantic model which brings all the elements in natural language together. That's very important because those characteristics make sure that we can cover every project. So the list of topics is infinite, so you can always add topics. But every time we add a topic, we always discuss, look, there are other topics in this list already. Do we need a new one, or is this one maybe sufficient for you? And if it's sufficient, then sometimes it can also, of course, be translated to the regional language, like French or Spanish or whatever. That's also part of this model. You can, across the languages, we know that we talk about the same thing. But that is an important part for scalability across regions. And then that's, I think, what I want to say about the semantic models. It's I can talk about these models for hours because it's a very interesting part, but it's in the essence, it's the core, let's say, the brains of the whole system, because it informs all the aspects from the data collection to the reporting, how you calculate your indicators, and also how you stay agile throughout the life of a project. And the life cycle of a project, in this case, could be between 30, 40 years and even longer, which you already know that in the near future, you will have adaptations, you will have additions that you need to incorporate, and your data model needs to be flexible and agile enough to support that. Thank you very much for your attention. And then we are opening the floor. You can all open your mic for any question you have.
Anyone? Also, if you have questions for Hunter now, more than welcome to ask them.
Boris, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Nice presentations by Hunter and you, Jan. I would like to ask you if you have used all of these data indicators in results in order to obtain, like, for example, ecosystem services outcomes or the value for nature credits outcomes, like nature positives actual outcomes. So if you didn't that yet, but if you are planning to do that, and how do you think that that process?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it's very broad. Nature-based solutions, of course, is a very broad terrain. But for example, there's a project in Zambia where they, and also in Indonesia, by the way, they are building kind of check dams to make sure that the water is not flowing away too fast. Because in Indonesia, they've got peatlands and they want to keep the peat very moisty, but the surrounding areas are plantations, and they want the groundwater table to drop. So they've got these buffer zones, and also in Zambia they've got these check dams in the dambos, in the rivers, to make sure the water stays in the area longer. And then, so that is one intervention they do. And they want to compare that with the groundwater levels which they are measuring throughout the year. And then one of the indicators is, can we see a change in the average groundwater level throughout our area or within the district number A, B, or C? So those types of indicators we have and are calculating them indeed based on, for this particular question. But you have many other nature-based solutions as well, but this is one which pops up right now. Yeah.
Okay, great. It's looking very nice, all of the new things that you are integrating in the Sensitive Plus platform. Very nice.
Thank you. Len, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Kees. So I appreciate the hearing both from you and Hunter with regard to working with communities and projects. So it's a landscape that I worked in historically and understand that. I'm in a slightly different situation now, in that the work that we are doing here is on private land. So it is freehold land where a group of people are making investments, purchasing up land that has not been used or farmed for probably anywhere from 20 to 30 years, and looking at rehabilitating it, wildlife coming back, linking up with national parks who are on our boundary, and expanding the kind of the landscape. And we probably don't have the rigor of having to develop evaluation and monitoring plans to the extent that one might have to in a more traditional project. But I'd be interested to hear, whether you've actually worked in this kind of setup with private owners or not.
Yeah, I think Hunter can also explain how that works in, for example, the Kasigao, an area in Kenya. Then the land is actually owned by private individuals. There's also communities living there, and they discuss how to develop that area and how to use the revenue of the project together. And the landowners, who are private landowners in this case, have also a say in that part, because they own the land, of course. In the other hand, if you have a system in place like this, we always say in a kind of joke, we can get you started in a day, which is not far beside the truth, but usually it takes about a week to really get you started. The thing is that if you have this data-driven insights, and if you can show the proof of what you are doing, you also have much better access to donors. And in those areas that you're referring to, you might also be interested, also the private owners of those landscapes might be interested in demonstrating the efforts they are putting into saving a species or saving a part of the landscape, which is important for nature conservation in one way or another. Also in South Africa, there's quite a lot of nature reserves are owned by private individuals or conglomerates, and they also need to report, the management on the ground needs to report to the owners, to the donors, the funders, how they are performing. And it sounds difficult and hard, but you can start small. And small means, for example, just start by recording the tracks where you go, where you do the patrolling, start recording the species that you've got on in your lands, with keystone species maybe, and what interventions you are conducting. So you can start very small and grow gradually, which is also a benefit of the approach that we use with Wildlife Works, because it's almost impossible to define a plan upfront, which is going to be tailor-made and fit for the future. So it's better to start and then grow into the project with a solid basis of which you know that it will grow with you.
Okay, yeah, very interesting. Thank you. And then just maybe a second question, if I may. In terms of, currently we do use a little data capturing tool, mainly for, well, at the moment we've started it off just for wildlife sightings. And ease of sort of importing data from these systems. We use, Rebecca might know it, Earth Ranger, which is very popular in this part of the world. And, can one easily integrate these systems into your collection?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Without any withholding. Yeah, no, it's the data integration is the easy part. Importing data from old existing historic records is also rather straightforward. So that is not really a concern. Sometimes you do indeed see that it's more the political side of things, that people are hesitant to adopt a system like this one because the neighbors are using already another system. And then are you going to deviate from the others? That's the challenge often. But integration is not a problem at all, in both ways. So data can flow from us to Earth Ranger and from Earth Ranger to us, or Smart, or Cyber Tracker, or 123 Survey. There's quite a lot of different applications that people are using in the field. If people are willing to collaborate and share data, then it's not a problem. Technically, it's not a problem.
And I just wanted to add on to your comment about like monitoring and evaluation, like the MEL plan at the beginning. I think one thing that's been, maybe this is me putting on my impact evaluation hat, but I think what I've experienced and would purport is that taking just like a few minutes to define what it is you actually want to do, it's going to go so far. Like it doesn't have to be this. I think the idea of a MEL plan feels really big, but it actually doesn't have to be really big. It starts with you guys as a group, or whomever is, the actors involved, identifying kind of what we would do with our, big communities, groups of like, what are your specific goals? And then just looking at like, if this is my specific goal, what pieces of data do I need to collect in order to assess whether or not it happened? So like, what data do I need as proof? And that's basically what you're going to start with. And so if you've identified those few pieces of like key data that you need for your maybe 3 or 4 goals that you have, that's when it's really useful to be able to go to Jan Kees and he can say, okay, you need this bit of data. All right, let's think through on the ground. And this is something they're really good at with our project teams of like, okay, you need to understand how this dam is or is not helping your like water table. So then, okay, what bits of information do we need to collect across the project site at different time periods in order for you to do that? So you kind of just work backwards, but I definitely would take even just a few minutes to kind of get a little bit specific about what you want, and that'll really go a long way in setting you guys up for success.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hunter. Thank you, Len. We are on the top of the hour. We will stay a bit longer in the call anyway. So Len, if you want to chat a bit more with us, but I think for everyone else, also, if you have more questions, please get in touch with us. No matter how big or small your company, organization, if it's private or not, we at Sensinclus, we are here really to help everyone. So please reach out to us and also to Hunter. We will also share the slides tomorrow and the recordings. And also, if you want to join other webinars, we have a few more planned for the rest of the year, the next one in October, based on citizen science projects. And then also we'd like to do another one on a bit more on impact reporting, hopefully with Hunter in December. Sign up for the newsletter and then you will always be up to date. And having said that, the official part is now over. As I said, we're going to stay here for a bit longer if you want to chat with us, but everyone else is also more than welcome to go back to work or enjoy the evening. And thank you so much, really, for your time.